So, TGIFT. We've been doing this for a long time, but we've taken a bit of a break. There's been a lot of innovation happening in Bittensor that has been so much bigger than the Opentensor Foundation. And so we've taken a step back and let a lot of teams and companies come into the ecosystem and really own it, which is, in the end, that's our goal. We tweeted about this, is that the Opentensor Foundation goal is to die. I'll talk a bit about that in this presentation. It's a bit of a paradoxical intention for a corporation, but we do really believe in decentralization, and that means getting out of the way. So I don't know if you guys saw GTC, fantastic presentation by NVIDIA. They have launched Blackwell, which is the fastest GPU in the world, and they're putting that in data centers, 32,000 strong. 645 exaflops of AI performance. Behind the scenes, behind Bittensor, the gargantuan company that is NVIDIA, that grows in our market cap every 10 minutes or drops every 10 minutes, they're fast working to build the largest supercomputers the world's ever seen and gift them to a couple individuals. This is a very expensive machine. No one in this call, no one at Opentensor, no company in the Bittensor ecosystem will ever own 32,000 GPUs on a subnet. And I want to talk about why that's really important. That's a nice chip. Who has $7 trillion to buy it? There's only really one man in the world and one organization in the world that can buy 64,000 of NVIDIA's best chips. And eventually it's going to be put behind this one individual or a couple individuals, organizations that are top down. And how could we possibly compete with that? How do we stop the inevitable outcome of $7 trillion worth of the world's compute being cloistered into a single GPU cluster owned by one individual or a number of individuals? Like, let's take a look at this. This is OpenAI on the left, 700 employees. I'm sure not even many of them have equity. Well, maybe all of them have equity, but maybe not very much compared to the founders who situate themselves behind the scenes in an not-for-profit, and that is controlled by a really small board. On the right-hand side, we have Bittensor. It's hard to calculate how many people are in our ecosystem, but this is the number of non-zero wallets. Our extension at Chrome is now 20,000 users. We can probably be pretty sure that those are individuals. As a company of people that actually own a piece of this infrastructure, cryptocurrencies have the ability to exponentiate ownership of core technology beyond anything that's possible within a centralized organization like OpenAI. I mean, I'm really doing them a favor by representing it as in this case, about 1,000 dots. On the right-hand side, this is 100,000 of Bittensor and growing. Because in reality, the system that's being designed by OpenAI is centralized or corporation. It's a normal structure. It's a normal corporate structure, and it has a very top-down hierarchical design. So all of these chips that are being built, they're all going to situate themselves underneath this company. And we need to stop this for a number of reasons. The main reason is that all of the value will be sucked up into the hands of these people, and all of the control will be sucked up into the hands of these people. And we need to make sure that we're building an ecosystem and an ownership layer where anybody in the world can contribute and own these chips. So Bittensor is fundamentally an open ownership layer. It's an aggregation of resources layer. That's why we don't need $7 trillion, because we don't need it $7 trillion individually. We can compile it from many, many people and stitch it together with protocols. It's what Bitcoin did to produce this largest supercomputer in the world, bigger than the $7 trillion ask that Sam Altman has. So Not only that, allocating $7 trillion and buying a bunch of GPUs is in the end going to be really inefficient. It's going to be a really inefficient way of organizing all of that capital. And Bittensor is also fundamentally a market mechanism. It's a competitive place where we only pay for what we want so that we can allocate way more productivity. We can produce so much more with so much less. And that's what I'm going to talk about here, what we've been doing over the last 4 to 6 months. Primarily, we've been working on allocating resources and showcasing what Bittensor can do, what it has been doing, where it can go. So we're only in 2023, but this is a bit of a story of where we've come and where we've come from. In 2021, we just had a single subnet. In 2022, we also only had a single subnet around information. In 2022, it was around prompting. In 2023, early 23, it was a sort of a ChatGPT interface. We were experimenting with the power of ownership first computation, of incentivized computation. And we learned a lot. And then in late 23, we let others contribute and own Bittensor and innovate on the way in which we could aggregate all sorts of different digital commodities. That's what Bittensor is. It's an aggregator. It's an optimizer of digital commodities. It's a technology which can plug itself into the servers that are owned by OpenAI and the 32,000 warehouses of NVIDIA. We can seep behind the data center and into every crack. And that means that we can grow bigger than anything that a single company can possibly raise, even if they're suckling off the tit of the quantitative easing tap on Wall Street, which is where you would get that kind of capital. So in 23, we opened it up to a lot of different individuals, a lot of different teams. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened over those few months. So it started in October, it's February, it's March now. And let's talk a little bit about the innovation that's occurred on Bittensor. Before I do that, though, I want to talk a little about what exactly is the core technology of Bittensor. It's abstract validation systems, the ability to write a digital commodity market in an ownership-first manner that can validate anything, from compute to human contribution to intelligence, inference speed, data collection, you name it. This is what subnet owners are building. They're building the validation systems. Those get turned into weights and injected onto the chain, the most abstract form that we could use to represent these type of allocation systems. And then those turn into incentive curves, which, if they're designed properly, are very competitive and drive up the thing we're aggregating or down the thing we're trying to minimize, just like we're training machine learning models. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on. I can't obviously talk about every mechanism on Bittensor, and as you'll see by the end of this call, there's no way I'll be able to even know about them all once we get to where we want to go. Optimized recall, this is Alpha Subnet, Opentensor's internal team, which is now external, Macrocosmos, invented effectively the one-way function for incentive mechanisms, where miners were incentivized to scour the web and build incredibly performant recall systems so they could answer questions. It's RAG on steroids. It's incentivized RAG. And every day this system improves, and they have a front end, and they're building a company on top of this. And we only pay on Alpha for the individuals and the computation which can effectively and performantly recall data, recall information, and synthesize it into a reasonable response. Alpha could potentially go on to totally scrape the entire internet and build miners that could rag the entire world. That's just Alpha. But some other subnets on Bittensor are optimizing other things, and this is like really a core aspect of what Bittensor can do. So we can maximize recall ability. We can also maximize the speed, how performant. If we want to build really, really fast front ends, search engines like Sybil.com, I think 1 million organic queries per day, passing through its validation system, passing through its validators to its miners, where the miners are being incentivized to return responses that are accurate and intelligent, but incredibly fast. They pinpoint this exact thing, inference speed. I don't know right now if people are running Grok chips, but eventually that will be the meta for winning on this subnet. And I want to point out this one specifically because it's probably the first of Bittensor subnet that's truly public facing. And it shows how we can bring the outside world into an incentivized architecture infrastructure so that we're not just connected to individuals that own TAO and mine TAO and contribute and validate, but we're also connected to the outside world and monetizing the bandwidth onto the infrastructure behind each subnet. So this is Delta, it's maximizing speed, minimizing loss. We set out to be an AI company, an open ownership AI company that was split across the world between many individuals. I think that we might be the only people ever that have trained a performant machine learning model in a distributed setting, in distributed incentivized setting in the world. This is like a holy grail, I think, for people in this ecosystem and in this industry of doing decentralized computation. Just today, Subnet 9 released, incentivized into production. Hardly we could say we owned it. It was given to the network. A model that was 40% better than OpenAI's equivalently sized billion parameter model. So, and that's on Wikitext. We don't know who made this model. I don't think that they're doxed in any way. We paid the best price we could for the lowest loss. Potentially, if you went out there and tried to hire engineers to lower the loss on a machine learning model, you might pick wrong, right? You might take that $7 trillion, you might buy the compute cluster, you might hire the engineers, and they might not be the ones you need for the job. Because we can represent exactly what we want, which in this case was minimizing loss. We know we can get that, assuming that there's enough competition. We can compete with the best in the world and pay the minimum price. Minimum loss, minimum price. We don't pay you any money if you can't train the machine learning model better than the previous guy. So perhaps a centralized organization would need to hire thousands of engineers and many thousands of GPUs to accomplish the same thing. Because we're a meta layer on top of all of the world's computation, we can design systems that get us exactly the thing we want, and we don't even need to know beforehand what that is. We can just represent it as a metric that we're minimizing or maximizing. I also mentioned news subnet as well. It's important to note that these guys, the news research team, best in the world at fine-tuning machine learning models. They built a subnet over the last 5 months for fine-tuning machine learning models, specifically 7 billion parameter models, and they couldn't even compete with their own subnet. These are the best engineers in the world at fine-tuning language models, and they are, but apparently there are other people out there that can do it. When you put capital behind them, they can potentially do it better than the best of the best. So that really showcases the ability for Bittensor to not only procure resources, but to search them out, to find the individuals that can solve the problems. We don't need $7 trillion worth. We can optimize it. We can be a lot more efficient with the way in which we distribute capital. We can aggregate data. This is Dataverse, but there's other aggregators on Bittensor. We don't need to go out and make any deals with Reddit or Twitter. We don't need to cut any contracts with social media companies. We just point Bittensor at aggregating data, and we get 10 terabytes in a few months. growing quickly. I think it's 300 megs per day, or no, 300 gigs. It's 300 gigabytes of data added to this pile every day, and increasing as more and more individuals come in to the system to add value, to add data into the system. We kick out those that cannot. There's no way that you can aggregate data faster than us. And this gets pushed into Bittensor's core ecosystem and can be used by other teams to make better and better architectures for machine learning models. We're really nascent. Like it's not there yet. We don't have an interconnect between this yet and the pre-training, but that's coming very soon. The point is that over the last 5 months, we've showcased that the UMA consensus, which is Bittensor's core technology, is expressible. So, pardon me, it can express many, many, many different core digital commodities and bring them into the Bittensor ecosystem, at glorious rates, at incredible efficiency. We can also accumulate the compute that we need to solve problems. Hey, well, why don't we just point a subnet at stealing away NVIDIA's chips from them? And if anybody has any lying around, we can also use those. This is Neural Internet's subnet 27 aggregating computation. It's got over 200 GPUs on it. It only just started to click a couple weeks ago, and is increasing at an exponential rate in the amount of compute that it can aggregate and bring into the ecosystem. So if we just want GPUs, yeah, we can get GPUs as well, and we can apply them and give them back to TAO holders. So people that own TAO get access to all of these resources. And our goal is to push the price of them down, so that there's no better place in the world to go and access everything you need to be an owner of the next industrial revolution of artificial intelligence. Just 32 right now. Really just a bootstrapping phase for what Bittensor is and can be. We know there's a lot of issues in the ecosystem. I know that there's a lot of people that are trying to figure out how to use our technology. Because we have open borders and the system is permeable, we have to worry about adversarial aspects of everything we do. It's really like machine learning on steroids. It's way harder to build incentive mechanisms. The technology the substrate that we're working with here is fighting against you and with you. As soon as you can click those incentives in place, the best teams that I've talked to have focused on this core technology. I'm not putting brands on this presentation because I want to focus on the core technology of Opentensor and just our symbology and really the abstraction layer that we have built. But there are a lot of different teams that are winning at this. They're becoming the best in the world at incentive design. And we have the best technology for them to use to build whatever it is they want, whether it's a backend for a company, or it's just aggregating value into the ecosystem, or becoming the biggest computational providers in the world, or training machine learning models more efficiently than OpenAI in the matter of months. That's just 32. And we're going to go a lot farther in 2024. We can add up compute as well. We can parallelize. And that's the whole thing that Kata did. Let's put more Kata cores. Let's drive this in design of technology to the moon, and they've exponentiated in a direction. We've found that, I think, with Bittensor, we're the best incentivized computators in the world, computers. This is 1024. I think that we can get there by this year. 1024 unique incentive mechanisms competing in a long tail mechanism to add value into the Bittensor ecosystem, and specifically add value back towards TAO holders. We can find the algorithms with a long tail research because we have the people, and we have so much demand to work with our technology that it is becoming impossible to even get a slot on the mainnet. We want to facilitate way more people We think that the innovation is going to come from just some random engineer out there in the world who picks up the Bittensor API, works with their own chain, gets it on the main chain, starts getting a trickle of an incentive, and finds the right incentive system to make everything click. As soon as we get these systems to click, they explode. Subnet 9, Subnet 6, Subnet 13, and others on Bittensor have shown what happens when we simply make them click. Yes, it's hard. Yes, the infrastructure works against you. Yes, there's weirdos in your Discord razzing you out and trying to mess with you, and it's the dark crypto anarchistic space. But we know that we're working with the most powerful technology in the world, and it's just a matter of learning how to aggregate it and direct it properly. I think that's where we are right now at the precipice of a huge exponential drive in what Bittensor can achieve. So in order to get there, we need to remove the root network from Bittensor. That's coming very soon. The goal is to build a competitive system where there can be not just 32, but 1,000, at least 1,000, but potentially thousands of subnets interconnected and competing for the decisions of every single participant in the ecosystem. So not just the bootstrapping nodes, the root nodes that have been doing a decent job up until this point, but we need to go beyond them. There's no better selector than TAO holders. There's no better democratic system than one where every single person can have a say and a vote about in what is incentivized and what Bittensor produces, so that we can work with really, really, really small amounts of TAO emission through an incentive mechanism where people can build a $5 computing ecosystem, and we can even work with altruistic systems where there's no incentive, and TAO holders can make those decisions instead of a small group of individuals where, albeit have done a good job, it does lead to some cronyism and centralization, which we want to get away from. So this is our goal for 2024. It's in the wraps. We have some papers to showcase coming out pretty soon around our proposal. But of course, we don't get to decide everything. So I want to talk about how we're going to be putting our proposal through for scaling TAO. Before we launched this proposal, we had the following design loaded that's going to be pushed to the main chain, which will allow any one of these groups. Triumvirate is mostly Opentensor employees. Ascendant is a bit like our oligarchic plutarchic arm, and the subnets are in many ways the most broad group of individuals. But in the end, all of them are being selected by TAO holders. And any of these groups can propose a change to the Bittensor ecosystem and make it go through. So in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will have our proposal ready, but it won't be able to go through until this system is in place, where it's a level playing field for anyone to participate in the pseudo democracy of the Bittensor ecosystem. So. Yeah, guys, that's a rundown of where we've been, where we're going, and why. And then I think now we're just going to transition into sort of like an open conversation. People can come on stage, ask us questions. That's it. Dan, thanks for coming to the talk, and let's do more of a open form. Great.
Well, I think one of the first questions is going to be, we mentioned proof of stake, right? In the Twitter, and a lot of people are curious, what is that going to entail?
Yeah, it's a really it's a good question. We purposely left it out of this because we believe that there are more important things that we want to decentralize first. Proof of stake is a 1.5 year time frame push for the Bittensor ecosystem. This means that at the chain level itself, we want to move to a system where anybody can contribute to the actual block transition and run a full node. But after what we saw last week, where we got ourselves into a bit of a pickle, we don't believe that we're ready to announce proof of stake just yet, and we want to focus more on economic decentralization and emission control and decentralization. It doesn't mean that's not happening. It just means that we're not ready to present that.
And so what would that essentially mean? Even though we're not ready to present, what would that mean on the proof of work on the subnet level?
Oh, it was never proof of. Sorry, sorry. Can you explain yourself, Bond? What do you mean?
In terms of proof of work, right? The chain has been proof of work up until this point, right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people got confused by this, and our apologies with the communication here. Bittensor uses 3 proofs of something. So we use a POA, a proof of authority, which means we have a set of authority nodes that are able to produce blocks at the chain level. And those blocks run the consensus mechanisms of the individual subnets. Inside the subnets themselves, we use a proof of stake, proof of work hybrid, where the miners are producing value, which is in the form of work, and the validators are verifying that work using a proof of stake mechanism. So nothing is changing at the consensus mechanism level of subnets. We were speaking just specifically about how we want to have more participants run the actual chain nodes that we connect to when we send transactions, specifically send wait transactions. Hopefully that clears things up for people, and there's no more confusion between those dual hybrid incentive mechanisms or sort of proof valid verification systems.
I think one thing to add here is that effectively when we transition to a proof of stake system, then that's really sort of, I think, in a lot of ways, the final nail in decentralization. Where sort of the foundation doesn't really own anything anymore. If the foundation were just to disappear off the planet at that point, wouldn't really make a difference, because everyone else would be owning all of the validators and all of everything that we don't really need to sort of exist to keep things running.
Yeah, precisely. We still as an organization run the lion's share of the ensure block production. Hence why it fell on our shoulders the other week when things didn't work. And that's something that we are moving away from at some point in Q4 or Q1 of next year. That's the intention. But where we want to focus, I want to talk a little bit about why we focused on economic decentralization first and foremost. I think that a lot of projects jump the gun with physical infrastructure decentralization, and maybe they need that because they're afraid of governmental top-down attacks. In our case, we're in Canada. We're formed in Canada. We're pretty sure that we're doing amazing work for the world, and that we're not doing anything that's shady or nefarious, and the governments would want to crack down on yet. And so, more importantly for us is to ensure that the token itself is decentralized. That's why we didn't do a pre-mine. That's why we focused on this long tail for subnets. That's why we want to get away from root centralization, is because that will ensure that there's a distribution, a wide distribution of those that actually hold the Bittensor TAO token. And from that, we can create all sorts of different types of decentralization using that as the Sybil entity, the foundation for other forms. I mean, a good example is like, Ethereum did a massive pre-mine, more than 50% of its token. And sure, it has 500,000 validators on its network, but at the end of the day, it's a proof of stake protocol, and all of the stake is controlled by a very small group of individuals. So even though they have really good infrastructure level decentralization, they don't have great economic decentralization. And I think that's the most important one. And we've always been very clear about why we think that it's more important for individuals to own a piece and make value from and be able to get access to. That's the kind of decentralization we've focused on. It doesn't mean that we want to throw proof of stake in the bin. It just means that when it comes to priorities, we want to move in it as quickly as we can to get the token into as many people's hands in a competitive and proof of work way. Bond, you want to read more questions from the chat here?
Yeah. So another question is unlimited subnets or 1024?
Well, 1024 might be effectively unlimited. We're not going to do unlimited because I don't think that the chain has infinite bandwidth. We have some of the best people in the world working on this problem, and I mean, well, we've toyed with the idea of potentially working with multiple chains inside of the Bittensor ecosystem itself, and keeping things like token balances on one chain. And if we are able to accomplish this, and I don't want to speak too much about it because we're not sure, we're just doing the due diligence to see if it's possible. But if we could do this, we could scale it infinitely. And that's where we want to go. We want to be truly the internet of intelligence. We want to be the neural internet. So, but hey, we're saying 1024. We're not saying an infinite number because I think that's a little bit too much for now.
All right. I like that. In terms of dynamic TAO, right? Without trying to bog down a specific date, when do we expect a proposal for this new triumvirate to be able to vote on?
We're actually the Bit2 proposal is going to be different than dynamic TAO, and look for it in the next month.
Ooh,
but we cannot promise. And I always come back to this: like, we cannot promise that will happen. What we want to promise first is that the proper foundation for democracy is in place. Right? That's the most important thing. Is that we have consensus amongst everybody as a stakeholder about where Bittensor should go, and we have our perspectives, and we will forthrightly argue for them. But this isn't a one-way street, so I can't say, we'll be here at this date. People will be forewarned for sure. People will know that a proposal is going through, and they'll be given plenty of time, and things will be as smooth as possible.
Okay. There's a couple questions here from the Twitter, people wondering about the exchanges. Obviously, we had the breakdown yesterday of what happened with the chain downage, but can we briefly touch on that before moving on to some further questions?
A post-mortem?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just the sentence, just the paragraph.
Post-mortem on the post-mortem.
Right?
Yeah. Well, the postmortem went really well. So, So effectively, we introduced a panic out of bounds error in the uninitialize step of block production, which was a really dangerous place for that to happen on the chain, and it stopped our validators, and we needed to recompile the Bittensor binary without the error, and then basically distribute that to many people. And it took a couple hours for us to get that onto everybody's validators, and then it took a couple hours more for us to get most people's light nodes and Docker images working, and then it actually took a couple days for us to get the archive nodes running again, because those archive nodes have this. They have to resync a lot of the state, and so it just takes a really long time when wielding massive backups. so that was why it took the time it took, and our reaction to that was that we needed to double down on computational verification, ensuring, like, before we run anything, that the simply mathematically impossible for there to be things like out of bounds. And we really think we're very close to that. Rust provides us a lot of tools to make that happen. And we have a full team at Bittensor right now, at Opentensor, focusing on ensuring that we can have that kind of computational verification. And once we have that in place, we'll be pretty sure it won't happen again. And not only that, but once we have that in place, we can be very confident about allowing way more people to participate in the governance of Bittensor, because we can say, hey, these are the rubrics, these are the bounds. Like, you need to be this, you need to use this much space, or you can only use this much space. What you write has to be computationally sound and provably so. And also, we can try the runtime upgrade before it happens. Like, if we can get these things in place, I think it'd be fantastic for the ecosystem, because it means we can even take a step back and allow for there to be contributions from anyone. That might even be better than what Bitcoin has, right? Where it's just kind of controlled by a single GitHub. We can properly open ourselves up and be an open source ecosystem.
Okay, that actually. I'm seeing a lot of follow-up questions in terms of liquidity, exchanges. I know this is something that people ask all the time. What is the Opentensor Foundation stand on engaging with exchanges and liquidity-related issues?
It's a big game that we've decided not to play too much into. I think that many people in this community have done a lot of amazing work to get us on exchanges, and that's a really, really, really great thing for increased liquidity. But I think that we actually have great liquidity. It's just in many ways it's shielded or covered up by the fact that our brothers and sisters on CoinMarketCap pay a lot of money for market makers to inject like false liquidity into the ecosystem. And we have not entirely, but just about entirely organic liquidity across exchanges. So our stance is we will provide as much information we can to exchanges, whether it's audits, if they want a name behind something. Opentensor Foundation has a name. We're registered in Canada. We will provide that, and we'll provide our names. But we are not actively pursuing that ourselves. We want to have them come to us, and they are.
And I think one more thing to add here is that if we actively pursue exchanges, then it sort of flies in the face of our ethos, in the sense that we are sort of saying that this is our token and you need to list our token. This is not really what we're trying to do, right? This is everyone's token. This is everyone's TAO. Similar to how Bitcoin is mugged to anybody, same goes for TAO. So this is part of the reason as well why we do not participate in exchanges or reach out to exchanges in the first place.
We don't want false liquidity. I mean, I think that exactly. Manipulates them. It's price manipulation. We've been, I think, very authentic as an organization, as a network, as a community, and that's what will take us through and keep us alive for a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah. The next questions are more to do with your recent talk in Singapore, Jacob Const. With Vitalik playing a guest speaker role. Do you want to touch on anything that you discussed there, or the value that you felt you might have portrayed for the Bittensor ecosystem in Vitalik's eyes?
Well, I was a bit disappointed that he supports WorldCoin. I've read his paper on wanting the crypto industry to get back to its cyberpunk roots, and then at the same time, he's just about promoting WorldCoin. I decided not to bring that up on stage because I just thought, hey, he probably gets a lot of pushback on all sorts of things, and it's not my place. I felt very honored that he was there and talking about decentralized artificial intelligence, and he's an incredibly intelligent man. It's just something else how deeply he engages with ideas that he only just partially has knowledge of. I don't think that he had the right ideas. I don't think he fully understood it. He's lived squarely in the crypto sphere, and so his perspective on artificial intelligence is very, very crypto-y. How can we use AI in crypto? It's people are either on both sides. We're squarely in the middle, right? It's we're working with the union of the two, and I don't think that he exactly got that. But I did speak to him for a while, and he I think changed his mind a little bit about what Bittensor was and what we were doing. Yeah, it was lovely. He's quite a special individual, very, very socially awkward.
Well, you're the social butterfly, so you can't compare.
It's like oil and water.
In terms of, I see this is quite an interesting question. You mentioned no government pressure yet. So this person asks, are there any upcoming high-end GPU KYC laws that we find concerning?
Well, that there are some governments that have been playing with the idea of needing jobs to be registered with the authorities before they can go through, and there's like the decel army. I think has the ears of governments, and I don't know why they do. But they're very good at getting that ear, and I think that's because governments love a narrative, and a fear narrative is the most powerful. So I think that there will be pushback from governments around the ability to train machine learning models. We'll just go outside those borders. We really can. So even though we're in Canada, we can move the base of operations at any time, and I think that we might have to do that, but we haven't seen any real pushback from governments. I think they know that this technology is absolutely integral to the innovation of their economies and the expansion of their economies. So they're not fighting. I think they would be kind of stupid to do it, but who knows? I haven't seen any specific legislation that I'm worried about.
Next question is, are subnets able to communicate with each other / interoperable yet, or is this to come?
They absolutely are interoperable. It's just a matter of that interoperability being built by validators, and for the first subnet to enforce it. Subnet 6 is a good example of where this is actually coming into play. It might be done even this week, where validators on 6 need data from 18, and so 18 validators actually open up an axon so that 6 validators can communicate with subnet 18 to produce synthetic data that is used for fine-tuning the models. Because TAO is global, that interconnectivity exists. It's like economic interconnectivity, because inside of each mechanism, the bandwidth you get is based on your TAO reserves, how much TAO you're holding on your validator. So just by the fact that there's TAO that is globally represented everywhere means that every validator gets access and can communicate with itself through its own staking account, if that makes sense. So it is inherently connected through TAO everywhere. It's just really a matter of writing the Python code to make that happen. And like data versus data is very valuable. Will probably be pushed into 9 fairly soon. I'm not entirely sure when, but 6 is definitely using 18 very soon.
Okay. This question is for Shib. Can you expand more on the dev environment sandbox clone of the main blockchain you referred to on yesterday's postmortem? So going back to postmortem.
Yeah, I can do. So Effectively, right now, what we have is a dev sandbox, a test sandbox, and the main chain. The dev sandbox sort of is pretty much our, developer sort of playground. We do all kinds of stuff in there. We bring it up, bring it down almost twice, 3 times a day. Testnet is where everyone's familiar. Sort of everyone's seen testnet before. A lot of people are deploying on testnet. I'm fairly certain quite a few people are actually already on testnet and about to go into mainnet. And then finally, we have the mainnet. So our idea after this incident is that we need a more accurate representation of the mainnet. The current testnet really is just a brand new network that effectively runs its own TAO and just has everyone's brand new accounts in whatever they created. But it's not even close to being a representation of the real mainnet. In creating a clone, effectively, which is basically a network that is sealed off from the world, but effectively does mirror the accounts and some of the activity in mainnet, we'll be able to actually test a lot of really sensitive and really stressy tests, things like storage migrations, things like network stress tests, and so on, without actually having to worry about breaking the network itself. So that if the clone breaks, totally fine. We know what happened. We know what's wrong. We can fix it. As opposed to, for example, deploying directly on mainnet and hoping for the best. So hope that answers the question.
Question comes from Nancy GPT. What is your biggest concern? And this is a two-part question. Biggest area of excitement for the network?
Was that for me?
For either of you. Both of you actually should answer that.
Yeah, scaling into the long tail of subnets so that there can be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teams so that individuals can own and test out all sorts of different mechanisms at the same time. That's really where we're going to get the most innovation for Bittensor. That's what really excites me. There's only one training network right now. Why? There should be 30. And people should run their own. And I think that is going to be fantastic for the ecosystem and for the community specifically to really get to know the technology. And so it will make us have to work really hard to build the best-in-class tools. There's other teams like Manifold that are building best-in-class tools for these people to use. That's my my excitement. Really, the only thing that I'm concerned about in the ecosystem is whether or not we can organize ourselves and make these pushes as a community towards better and bettering Bittensor. So that it's definitely a little worrying to give away all this power. We know we have to do it. And will the ecosystem be able to organize itself? We've been pushing this up for a really long time because we know that it takes time for the community to grow. But I mean, I think we can. So even though I'm a bit worried, I actually am quite confident that we're going to grow into an amazing nation state of teams that are contributing and improving Bittensor daily.
Dib? Shib's not scared of anything. No concern.
He's
not scared. He's not happy either. He's not excited. He's neither nor excited. I think he dropped off.
Absolutely. I'm just kind of running around, sort of trying to answer this and that, and responding to some folks here and there.
Okay. Right. You're in the chat.
It's partially, yeah. No, the one thing I was just gonna say is that what's coming in the next year, and that's one thing to kind of keep in mind for a lot of people, is I'm sensing there's a lot of expectation that a lot of this should be ready to go, and why is X, Y, Z happening, or how come you guys aren't fully decentralized, yada yada. It's important to keep in mind that a lot of the work that we are coming into now is work that is not only intending to complete a first step towards the project itself, but is also work to kind of solidify a foundation so the project can be decentralized safely. And so, for example, Bitcoin's been around for let's say 13 years at this point, and they're still adding updates. We are still rather early in the space, and we're still rather early as a project. We're also still rather early in the research on AI and crypto. So a lot of this really comes down to, how well can we align these incentives in this next year? How well can we align everybody's bottom lines in this coming next year? And that's really going to be our main focus.
Okay. And just to say that, we aren't avoiding any specific questions. This one's from Cos. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Cosimo Capital. Are you going
Cosmo.
to address the?
The
It's
weight
not
copying.
Cosmo. The weight
Cosimo.
copying. Yeah.
The way, yeah, totally. Yeah, we have a commit reveal strategy coming down the pipeline that we think will work. It'll allow subnet owners to deal with the problem through hyperparameter changes. It's not a, it's not an all-in-one solution. It will be subnet specific. I can talk at length about how that will be designed. We have, a lot of thinking around it and even an implementation. We're just not ready yet to implement it. But yeah, that will be something that we might even push that before we push out the detailed proposal. That's the second question, right? What is the ETA for dynamic TAO? Like I said, I can't give it. That's good. You don't want me to be able to give it. And also I would say you don't need me to give it because we're going to launch dynamic TAO over a period of weeks so that everyone is familiar with the way it works. And it should be designed in such a way that for most people, nothing really changes. And that's only if the proposal goes through, right? So I can't give you an ETA. Is the foundation going to start allocating tokens to new validators? We don't. Like the foundation itself doesn't allocate tokens. Individuals do, right? That donate. Will they delegate tokens to the foundation? Will those people allocate their tokens to new validators, including myself? Yes, I mean I do, depending on whether or not I think that the validator needs support or if they're building something that I want them to build. That's been Bittensor's like early day mechanism for sort of like a liquid democracy. It's still sort of in place, but changing. But yeah, so that's my answer to that particular question.
Okay.
And Bom, should we just go down this list? Is Elon already known with Bittensor? We know him? We know Elon. Of course, he named his child after us or something, didn't he? His next child's gonna be called TAO. Everyone knows this.
Or Yuma.
Yeah, probably Yuma TAO. That sounds like Elon Musk's son. I have no idea. No idea. I don't care. Is the mobile wallet still in the pipeline? Yeah, mobile wallet. Yes, it's coming very soon. I don't want to speak for that team though. How long will the usage of the intelligence be free? Good question. Bittensor is transitioning into, it's slowly transitioning into a more competitive system where validators will want you to actually purchase TAO and delegate it to them before they give you that bandwidth. But more on that a bit later. We have some research coming down the pipelines on that. Not any time in the next 6 months. How exactly would a subtensor branch of code affect the main chain? Branches won't affect the main chain. It's fine. Make a branch. Don't worry. When a subnet to make text to video, I think it's happening. I think Omega is actually building that right now. We're going to get like TAO Sora, Tora. We'll get Tora pretty soon. Well, I'm not so sure if it's exactly soon, but it's been promised. I know that team is working on it. This is another reason why we want to scale subnets is because there's teams that are like, well, we want to do training subnet. There's just so much competition. There's so much good stuff out there on the network that they have to compete with the last best subnet, and it's really good, right? So where can they start to get these emissions? And so we want to build that long tail and allow them to participate way early on. Are we still bullish? We're always clear-headed, clear-pilled. Do you see any potential competitors? We're going to grow them inside of the ecosystem. We don't focus outside. We just focus on making sure that the system is competitive at every level, whether or not it's at the government level, at the mechanism level. We want the competitors to be here inside Bittensor and focusing on building from the inside out. So do I see any competitors? Don't care, don't know. I don't think so. Care to explain what happened with subnet 3 hotkey incident? Oh, I don't know. I need some more information on that. When TAO ETF...
I think it's better to pick this up with subnet 3.
Yeah. Is Barry on the call? He can answer that question. Right? Let's go down. There's a lot of questions here. This is fun. This is it's like rapid fire. What's when you were talking about weirdos in the channel, were you specifically talking about me? Yeah, it was.
It's mostly me, actually.
Yes,
I've got like several accounts on Discord right now running, just so you guys know.
Yeah, you're right. That is you, Ala. So what's the utility of the token? Really pointed question. So each subnet inside of Bittensor produces some commodity. If it's done properly, it maximizes the production of that commodity. So subnet 27 is incentives, is taking the emission of TAO and it's turning that into as many computers as it possibly can. Aggregate so that they are accessible to those that are staking inside of the subnet. Subnet 13 is aggregating as much, it's scraping as much data and putting it into a shared database so that, and that is given to the people that own TAO. Some of the subnets don't really have a very clear, you could say, market mechanism utility design. They're really more like bootstrapping. But for instance, subnet 9 is just training machine learning models. But I think that it's not too hard for people to imagine how you can go from, hey, we can get the lowest loss of machine learning models, but only the machine learning models we tell them to train, towards something where that model is encrypted in a way that the validators on the subnet get that thing, or subnet 4 is inference speed, right? Like they're pulling some commodity into the ecosystem to maximize that thing, and it's available proportionally to those that own TAO within inside of the ecosystem. Oh, Ala just dropped, unfortunately. And right now, that goes to everybody who owns. That goes effectively. It's controlled by the people that hold TAO. In practice, it's controlled by the validators, where the TAO is delegated. They have access to all of those resources in proportion to the amount of TAO they have. So that's the utility of the token. The utility of the token is the ability to access it bandwidth-wise. There's more on this coming later, how we want to make that a lot more specific and directed towards individuals, so individuals can selectively pick where they want to allocate their TAO control and extract the most amount of value. I think that's a requirement for Bittensor. Are the incentives to hold the value? Is it going to be the currency to use the intelligence? Yes. When collaboration with Vitalik, I don't not have anytime soon. When is
actually
Bittensor
skipped
ledger?
over one question.
We did?
I'll have to interrupt you here.
Yeah. What are they?
Because Florence asked, 1024 seems like a considerable challenge for quality monitoring. I think you had when we had our internal discussion, I think you had a very good answer for that.
Well, this is why the real bottleneck at Bittensor right now is the root network, because it's just simply impossible for individuals to vet all of the ecosystem participants at the same time. 32 is just way too many. I mean, I've done a lot of it. I take calls all the time. What is it? How does it work? Where's your front end? Blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the best way to elicit the proper estimation of the value of things is through market dynamics. It's through many, many participants being part of that endeavor to find what's good and allocating based on their utility. So we want to get there, tiny steps at a time. But if we can basically leverage more democratic, collaborative participation of many, many, many different individuals, that means individual TAO participants can vote and selectively pick the subnets they want. Then we can scale. So it's more of like, it's actually an intelligence problem of the humans within the root network. It's not even the potentially cronyism, or it's not even the bandwidth on the chain. It's not even the storage on the chain. It's simply the bandwidth of human time and mental space. So, that's why, in order to get to 1024, we think we need something like DTAO and STAO. Should I go more rapid fire here, Bond? This is fun. I hope people are having fun. I'm having fun.
More rapid fire without getting into the when 4 digits types of questions.
When 4 digits. I mean, just add a decimal point, guys.
How do people build new subnets if it requires a lot of TAO to register?
Exactly. Well, we lower the cost. And the way we lower cost is we increase supply. Simple answer. There's just way more demand than there is supply right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that cost varies, right? It's dropped considerably since since it was I think 10,000 TAO at one point. But yeah, it's variable. Yeah. So if there's demand, the cost of registering the lockup, right? Because you're not paying, you're just locking up your tokens. You get those back. But anyways, when will Const go on the Bittensor Guru podcast?
With Keith?
I like Keith. I'm his number 1 fan.
Me too. Soon. It's like we're like dancers in a hall, like circling each other, staring at each other across the room. It hasn't happened yet, but it will. Yeah. No comment.
Can you clarify Subtensor's validator distribution status? Like how many validators? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We own the lion's share. So we own 16, Ella, 16 of 20. 16, I'll say 16 of 20. Foundry owns the other chunk. And then with the idea with proof of stake is that we can move that out into concentric circles of more and more individuals and really carry the balance. At this point, it's like people are like, we don't want to do that. That's expensive. Why would we do that? So we've been able to pump all of the value because we don't have a reward for running these validators. We simply run them for free, and it's very expensive. So we would like people to do that when proof of stake arrives.
Next question: chance for custom subnet consensus.
Very cool question. Yeah, can we do custom? Yeah, this is what we really want. This. I mean, we're not there yet. Like we just unleashed the ability to write the subnet mechanisms, and it took a little while for people to understand how to use that and put that into place and get that working. And it is about 100 times easier to build a subnet than it is to build a consensus mechanism. But I think people will be able to do it, and really. It's just a set of mathematical functions. It's a matrix multiplications that are aggregated and applied after each other to create a tractor state based on speculation from the validators and the bonds and stuff like this. And this is human consensus. You can read about it. And we're pushing more and more research on this and improving it. And we would love to see people that can write their own. But right now, is it at a state where we can just throw that out to the community and they can write their own consensus mechanisms? Maybe not yet. Maybe I'm wrong, but either way, we need to build, that computational verification layer on the chain, so that if somebody comes up with a new consensus mechanism, it doesn't just bork the chain because it takes too long or uses too much space or does it a panic out of error thing. Maybe there's a multi-chain future of Bittensor. Just throwing that out there. We don't know. Where people can do this kind of thing. And we don't care. You broke your own chain, not my chain. But we're all integrated into the same ecosystem. I think that might be where things go, not in the next couple of quarters.
We skipped over a question. So how is Bittensor going to provide services that need to treat sensible and private data?
Good question. The privacy is a difficult thing for a decentralized network that is permissionless, because the only way that you can guarantee privacy is if you encrypt the thing that is publicly available, right? Because otherwise it's not permissionless, right? Anybody can join. That's what permissionless means. So if you're sending requests or you're asking them to do work on data that is encrypted, it needs to be encrypted in such a way that they can work on it without ever knowing what it is. Otherwise it's public, right? So we stand at the forefront of extremely open systems. So privacy is not really one of our selling points. Hey, we can see everything. Maybe transparency is great. So yeah, homomorphic encryption. There are tools. They slow things down. And hey, actually, I'll say this: if you build decentralized permissionless systems that are actually privacy preserving, usually they have bounds that make them way more privacy preserving. So much viscerally and verifiably more privacy preserving than a centralized entity saying we won't share your data, because we all know that behind the scenes it's possible it's just some guy that can see your account, right? So we don't have it, and until we have it, it'll be better than everyone else.
With congestion on the main issue, an issue over the last few months, how is scaling to handle 1024 SN going to be addressed? Subnets.
Sorry, actually, I didn't quite understand that question. Bon, can you repeat it? What?
With congestion on the mainnet an issue over the last couple months, how is scaling? How are we going to handle scaling with 1024 subnets?
Yeah, well, if you look at the congestion that occurred, it was actually created by a couple things that we could easily solve. So, like, one of them was some subnets just had miners setting weights all the time, and that's going to create 10-fold as much weight setting as needs be. And then also validators were setting weights very often when they didn't need to set weights as often, and we can blacklist their ability to do that. And then also there was a situation with the registration where because subnet owners were not able to set the alpha parameter, it was very sporadic. It was kind of like this weird race condition where it would go to like 8 TAO per registration, then 4 TAO. And so when it was 4, everyone would register, and then it would go back to 8, and then it would go back to 4, and so forth and so on. And this created this situation where people would just run continuous registration scripts. And this was basically DOSing the chain. So a lot of the bandwidth and scaling problems that we're seeing today are totally self-created and can be solved to a large degree just by building better blacklisting at the actual chain level. So if you look at how the chain is doing now, it's a lot better. And that's just because we pushed a change a couple of weeks ago that blacklisted people from setting weights unless they had more than a couple thousand TAO. And so we think that we can look at these things and scale them now by watching, how big these blocks are, and we can even increase the block size if we need to.
All right. Well,
I think one more.
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
All right.
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing to add here is that prior to scaling to anything like 1024, 2048, and so on, a lot of these little problems that Constance just mentioned obviously have to be resolved. And so, for anybody who's scared we're going to scale 1024 tomorrow, it's not going to be one of those things that we're just going to fire off and go. There's even a lot of checks and balances till we get to that point. And once we are confident, then we'll incrementally grow into that point. So we're really going to hit 1024 right off the bat. Just as a heads up, because I'm hearing a lot of people who are rather concerned about this.
Yeah, no, we can't get there. I mean, we can't get there until we have a mechanism for selecting weights that is more democratic and collaborative and open and distributed across many people. So it's going to take some time, but very soon we'll let you know how big we're going to go, and we're going to monitor that. And yeah, it should be totally fine.
This next question actually hits me personally because I'm getting a lot of other projects from different ecosystems trying to get involved with TAO, and it's thoughts on utilizing Polkadot to scale.
Using Polkadot.
Yeah.
Using Polkadot scale?
To scale. So
To
essentially
scale.
the like becoming a parachain.
Yeah.
We still have the parachain slot, but
we said no, we're probably gonna well, I don't know. We haven't yet seen that Polkadot makes sense for us yet. We haven't actually even really considered it for more than a year. I think just about 1 year ago, we were supposed to launch on Polkadot and discovered that it was just an absolute fool's errand to attempt it, and we didn't need it. And I think, from what I understand, there are some kind of pivoting positional things happening in the Polkadot ecosystem. Captain Wood's making decisions about how he wants that technology to work that might suit us, not even being a parachain, but being something else. In relation to the Polkadot ecosystem, we have a lot of cariño and love towards Polkadot for building Substrate, and we absolutely admire the technology they built. It just hasn't yet worked out that it makes sense for us to connect in, especially when it comes to scaling, because they have block limits, they have time limits on the blocks. So when we want to go to 1024, for instance, we can't maybe increase the block size or the block time. And that's a real cost for us. So there are more important things. I'll come back to this. It's like economic and computational decentralization are the most important things of what we're doing right now. And so we don't want to make decisions that put us in a bad position to actually scale in those ways.
What are the next upcoming events for Bittensor in terms of in-person events?
Oh, well, that's a good question for you, Bond.
Well, we're looking to potentially be at Consensus. I know Shiv's going to be at an AI conference in Singapore. All right. If there's any conferences that people would like us to attend, we're not promising that we will attend them, but we can maybe make sure some of our delegates are there.
I mean, I think it might be time for TAOCon, guys. What do you think?
I think so.
That's the next step. That's the penultimate step.
Who would go?
I would.
I would go fully. I'm too busy.
We got 10.
Just so you guys know.
Only if there's goodies, if there's pizza, if shrimp comes. If there's a booth for Manifold, if there's a wrestling match between me and Allah. If it's in Dubai, we can't promise anything.
Maybe asks, how often do such open talks happen on Bittensor?
More.
TGIFT. We need more. Would it be possible for Root to select certain members from the community to help them vet potential subnets while waiting for the changes to be implemented?
I think that we should have, in the interim here, a call like this potentially every week, if not more often, where subnets come up and talk about what they're doing. So it's like a micro TGIFT for teams. I think that would be really beneficial, like to bootstrap the process of us democratically and openly and transparently making decisions about why things are the way they are. I think it would just be great content also. Yeah, really fun. There's amazing stuff going on. I only got to talk about 5, and that was just the tip of the iceberg of the mechanisms that people are doing. There could be entire research departments for each of these papers, for each of these subnets, and there's just not enough currently bandwidth for us to do it all. But yeah, so I think that a weekly call with people up here, teams coming on and talking about what they're doing, I think that would be fantastic. Let's do that.
Well, you just front ran my announcement because I was planning on announcing something similar. Well, essentially every Tuesday or Wednesday for subnets to come and talk in this TGIFT channel or a different dedicated channel, where I will host them and we'll give them opportunity to talk about their subnets, what they're doing, their incentive mechanisms, and just to get eyes on what they're building.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think it's a really good idea. I think it'll also be good for the whole community, kind of see what everyone's up to as well, and not sort of have everybody siloed off like this. I guess an alternative would be to put them all in a coliseum with some lions and see what survives.
Right, exactly. And of course, the community will be able to ask them questions. What are your thoughts on the idea of reducing APY for periods of underperformance as under the new proposal instead of putting stake TAO at risk?
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. That's all I'll say.
What Bittensor on Ledger? Well, that's up to them. Will Bittensor be used as a currency within the network?
What? It is.
It is, yeah. So, I think.
Will Bittensor work on artificial intelligence anytime soon? Will Bittensor launch a token anytime soon? Yes.
We're still StageNet though. We're not really mainnet yet.
Yeah. A white paper soon.
Trying to skip some of these.
Guys, this is such great feedback and awesome questions. There's a lot. Oh my gosh, this is the best TGIFT ever. And you're in it. We're in it.
We've been going on here for over almost an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions just keep coming and coming and coming, and I'm all for it. But trying to find some ones that we haven't yet addressed. Here might be a good one for you guys, an easy one. What is your background before creating TAO?
Scamming people. No, I'm just kidding. I was at Google, and then before that I was at a neuromorphic chip company that is, well, I don't want to say anything, but very fucking cool. A company that is now just about to take the world by storm.
What subnet would you say is the best to start mining for someone that's an amateur?
Extropic, but Ala, your background.
What? Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say less of a sexy background. Classic academic AI. Did some work on distributed compute at VMware, and hopped on the project like 2019. Yeah, pretty boring stuff.
Boring smart kid stuff, went to school, did the right thing, wrote research papers, made things work. Okay.
Thanks.
Had to be right, nerd.
Bro, I barely graduated high school. I'm just saying.
Holy Lions. Yeah. Cool. I these questions keep on coming, but well, actually, I don't know. I don't mind it. We can stick around. People are interested in stick. Should we stick around? Should we just keep on answering questions until the cows come home?
Let's go for it. Thoughts on existing tokenized projects registering subnets?
It's really interesting, actually. I'm open to it. I don't know how it connects exactly, but I am open to it. I just haven't seen a mechanism. I'm really just interested at the core of the validation systems. Like, do they work at maximizing digital commodity production? Because that's the thing. I tell this to every team I talk to. You have a subnet. It's like a bucket. And you want to fill the bucket up with as much digital commodity as possible. And the way to do that is to make an incredibly competitive mechanism. One that only rewards when the thing is maximally being produced and hopefully is continuous and infinite in that direction. So people can just keep on getting better at producing more of the digital commodity that is required. More compute, more data, more loss reduction, more inference speed, more whatever you want to aim it at. That's the thing that I'm interested in, because it's what accumulates the most amount of value for token holders in the Bittensor ecosystem. that token, websites, blah, 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 all this stuff is sort of irrelevant if you can't get the, it's like, oh, I started an AI company, but I don't know how to train a machine learning model. It's like, well, I'm in a local minimum, it's collapsed. Everything's nans. Well, focus on that. Focus on exactly getting the design of the incentive mechanism to work, and that's what hopefully the community will eventually reward when the root network is no longer in control. Does that need a token? Maybe, right? I don't know. A lot of innovation happening on Bittensor. I'm open to people trying everything to see if we can maximize these things.
I personally speak to at least 2-3 projects a week who are other blockchains already and are trying to build on Bittensor. And some do their homework and some come to the call asking for permission to build, and I tell them it's permissionless and they can do whatever they want. But there are some good ideas.
That's the best.
Right?
That's the best. They're like, I would like to build something, and then it's just silence. It's a silence. Well, why are you asking me? Don't ask me.
But on the flip side, there are some ones that actually have some high quality ideas that they're looking to start building on testnet and looking forward to seeing what they can come up with. But it's open to all, right? We don't have control. We don't have say over who can or cannot build, right? And I think people don't yet fully understand that. So can you maybe explain the process?
Yeah.
Of how that works?
I will, but I mean, I have to catch myself because it's actually not totally true, right? Because the root network is a small group of people that make a lot of really big decisions, and they're good people and they do their best. But power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And centralized power is everything it should be anathema to us. So people do kind of need to get attention, and that's not a good game, right? Or if they have to get attention, they should have to get the attention from the most amount of people, and people should have to put their money where their mouth is. So that's our main focus. That is the only thing I really care about in Bittensor right now. That is what I am focusing on 100% of my time, and we're getting very close. So yeah, like, yes, it's permissioned otherwise though. Like we don't totally control it. And people can build, and I would love to see people building on testnet and showcasing what they can build there, even though they're not on mainnet. They can still really play with this technology and get it to work.
Cool. Hey, Cost, have you gotten any recent legal feedback on whether TAO token can be considered a security?
Someone did it.
They mentioned that.
Someone did it once, and I think that the outcome, according to them, was that it wasn't.
I can maybe help on that one if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We've been in chatter with quite a few people interested in the project. I will not mention names because we aren't supposed to. But the main feedback has been that we are rather high on the tree in terms of hanging fruit for this sort of thing, meaning that when it comes down to being a security versus a commodity, we are pretty close to being a commodity so far, according to all their legal opinions. But that's all that stuff is mostly internal to those companies who are interested, not to us specifically. So, sorry, say again?
No, I mean, we can be optimistic also, but then like you guys heard the news with Ethereum, right? Recently today. So things can flip and change, and centralized organizations make decisions that are arbitrary. We hope, and we will argue, that we are becoming probably the most commodity digital currency in the space. So yeah, but it's not that we're not there yet. Just ask.
No, we're not quite there yet. The less we own TAO, the better. That's sort of why our philosophy is always stay away from exchanges, stay away from speculation, stay away from all these things. I know some people really want us to kind of be more involved in that, but that's specifically why we're doing okay on that side. It's because we're not involved in these things.
Could incentivized smart contracts be implemented on the TAO blockchain? And if so, how does this affect rivals?
I mean, we could, but we're careful about giving too many tools to people to just arbitrarily choose how TAO is directed just yet, because we know that the first thing people will do is just build Ponzi's. And we want to focus this technology towards production of artificial intelligence and digital commodities, and and so we don't think that people need smart contracts to do that. Maybe just yet. It's like most people that want that access are using it because they don't really want to add value into the Bittensor ecosystem. So we're not yet ready to open that up, but we want to see proposals. It doesn't mean that we're pushing back on anything of that quality. We definitely want to see proposals, but we'd like to see them actually fleshed out before we said yes. Like, we have to be careful about how this ecosystem directs its inflation and its emission, and where value is being accrued.
Any penalties planned for subnets locking up their regs for no reason behind a huge paywall?
Sorry, what?
Any penalties planned for subnets locking up their regs for no reason? It's gotten some.
Yeah, I think that the community should push back on that if it's designed in such a way to, help a small group of individuals and not produce a competitive game. And you'll see that in whether or not the subnet actually produces value, right? If they lock up registrations, it's not competitive. How are they possibly going to be able to produce the most amount of value in this subnet? People should fork what they're doing. People should not support that because it's not actually adding value towards TAO holders, right? So, should they have penalties? Yeah, if it's badly done, if it's not producing value, yeah, absolutely. And the penalties will be that, the penalties really has to come from the community, and eventually will totally come from the community. But let's I think we should wrap it up here, Bond. We've done a lot of questions. I think we've touched on all sorts of stuff. It's been a fantastic call. I think people understand where we're going. Now it's kind of diverging into random questions, but we can do this more often. We can get way more questions. Clearly, it's because there's been a buildup of questions. So I think we should end it here. Thanks everyone for coming. Huge round of applause for being at the biggest TGIFT ever. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Can't wait to see everyone here. Let's get some more people on stage. Subnet owners, if you want to get up here and be interviewed by me and we talk about your validation system, let's do it. I'm so down to talk tech with you guys and see what you're building. So, yeah, ciao, everyone. Lots of love.
Yep.
Ciao. Ciao, bye.
Thanks all.